if you go back through Seven Deadly Sins, and especially for Fortnite's The Apocalypse, who would you think is the actual main antagonist of the entire franchise? Who has caused the most suffering? Who has effectively caused so much death, destruction, and if one thing went wrong, the world would have ended? It's not the Demon King, surprisingly enough. I wouldn't even say the Ten Commandments. And at this point, I wouldn't even say Kath. It's Merlin. Merlin is the actual villain of the story, even though no one is going to say that, and even though that's not the initial intention of Nakaba Suzuki based off the writing. But my god, when you really think about it at this point, Merlin is the one that has caused the most death and destruction based off her own decision-making from Seven Deadly Sins, and the entirety of Four Knights of the Apocalypse, and everything that's happened in it is the result of her. And yes, I will die on this hill. Because in chapter 238, Lancelot just rightfully says, hey, you were tampering with forces that you had no idea about. You, in your thirst for knowledge, for a power that was basically unknown, that you had no idea what the capabilities were truly of due to how it was barely recorded in much myth and texts. You unleashed that into the world, and now it has come back to bite you because the embodiment of pure evil and malice in the world now has basically 90% of it now because of your sheer and utter lack of planning, and because you had no idea that this would actually happen. You are an idiot. I'm paraphrasing that last section of it, but Lancelot has a point. Merlin fully is responsible for all this. I know he blames Arthur and Merlin, and Arthur's trying to say, hey, don't blame Merlin, she had no idea this would have happened. No, fully blame Merlin. Arthur is just a victim at this point. I'll make another video talking about how Arthur is the real victim of this entire goddamn story. But Merlin is the villain. She is fully fledged responsible for every bad thing that's happened in Four Knights of the Apocalypse, and even to an extent Seven Deadly Sins, we really have to think about it. Because going back to her backstory, after her, her heartbreak with Meliodas and everything, she thrust herself into wanting to study knowledge to fill in that hole in her heart until she discovers the power of chaos. She meets the Lady of the Lake that tells her about chaos and some conditions, stuff like that could help break the seal, yada yada yada. You could say the Lady of the Lake is the main villain of the story, and that might be the twist reveal at the end. But for right now, I'm saying Merlin because Merlin is the one who decided to go through all the hoops to unleash chaos into the world. Not only did she basically gain immunity for the brainwashing of the goddesses and immunity to all commandments by promising to both the Demon King and Supreme Deity she'll pick a side with whoever gives her a better blessing, and decides, oh, thank you for these blessings, two great deities of this universe and embody basically good and evil. Fuck you, I'm gonna keep this, I just pulled one over your asses. And then just that decision led into the complete extermination of her entire homeland of some of the most knowledgeable and powerful sorcerers and magic users and scholars in Britannia, because Lord knows if they were still around, the ensuing holy war and the future might be a bit different for all we know. So that's the first take against Merlin. Throughout the entirety of the holy war, she was taught by Gother, the original Gother, now to, use magic. Time passes, holy war ends, we get the Great Seal, and Meliodas is suffering through all these different loops. She meets up with Meliodas at some point. They end up creating the Seven Deadly Sins from people who have suffered and people that, in the visions from Bartra, would be the ones that would fight against the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments are revived. Merlin and everything is setting things up. She does see the potential, most likely, that the Demon King will come back at some point because the seal's broken. So she wants the sins to be strong enough. So she helps everyone take on the commandments to try and beat them, and even studies the commandments that she has captured, like Grey Road and later on Melascula. But the real thing that really screwed everybody over was when she let the Demon King revive into Britannia. When she used this grand magic spell during the Holy War arc on the cocoon that Meliodas was in, when he basically was fully removed from his emotions to the point of wanting to be Demon King, gaining all the commandments to become the Demon King, she, instead of freezing time, like she said she was, she instead decided to use a spell to accelerate the time it would take for Meliodas to basically fully merge with the commandments to become the next Demon King. Which by doing so, she would most likely know, due to her direct involvement with the Demon King in the past, was the Demon King's Trojan horse to possess Meliodas' body to be incarnated into that world. Because as we later learn, Merlin needed at least the Supreme Deity or the Demon King, one of these two deities that sit with chaos, to die so that seal can actually be able to be broken. So she's like, Bond went to purgatory to free Meliodas' emotions, and he's immortal. He might be able to do this. He might be able to set him free. So, in the meantime, while everybody is off doing their own thing, Elizabeth, Deanne, and King are fighting Esta Rosa / Mael, and all that stuff is going on, and they're on their way to that location. Escanor, Merlin, and Ludociel are fighting against Zeldris, Cusack, and Chandler. And the fight's doing pretty damn well until we get the original demon. Escanor gets his first loss in the series because it was nighttime, and Escanor wasn't at peak noon, ended up going past high noon. He was getting weaker every second because his fight with Zeldris caused him to go through the one very quickly, and the original demon was too strong for him, unfortunately. We get the original demon taken out by Mael. Demon King gets revived thanks to Merlin accelerating things, and all the Sins aren't even together yet. Everybody was getting their asses handed to them until Bond made his grand return to save the day. But even then, Bond with his Purgatory amp wasn't strong enough to 1v1 the Demon King for long because he was just that strong at that point. Even though he knows the powers of the Demon King, Bond was still having a relatively hard time towards the end of it. It wasn't until Meliodas was fighting back from within that the Sins were able to defeat the Demon King and free Meliodas of the commandments. But the Demon King wasn't dead. Merlin probably knew that but had no way of telling the Sins that, or maybe she thought he was dead until she figured out that he wasn't based off of how the world was reacting to Meliodas being the Demon King. Maybe thought, oh, it wouldn't react this harshly to just one Demon King. Maybe the actual Demon King is alive, but how do I tell them that the Demon King is still alive? Oh, I know. I will reinstate the reincarnation curse on Elizabeth, someone who I view as an older sister figure to me, someone who I do care about, and reinstate that curse to its very last second so that she could almost die. I save her. Be like, hey guys, Demon King's around. He brought back that curse. Oh, let's go beat him and all that stuff. And I'm like, Merlin, you didn't have to go through all those hoops to tell them that the Demon King was around. You could have just told them. But no, she had to be a bit more personal and stuff like that. And I'm like, what's more personal than knowing that the Demon King's still around and possessing Zeldris' body? That would have really helped with Meliodas' motivation. And hell, it did. She didn't have to bring back the curse of Elizabeth so that they could have an excuse to know that the Demon King's still around. She probably understood the Demon King was still around at that point, back when they were leaving to go to the Demon Realm. So she reinstated that freaking curse. But then, we come back full circle with the power of chaos revived. Because now Arthur is revived with the power of chaos. A 16-year-old kid who has never experienced any ability to use magic awakens to the power of a god, the power of the being that created the whole world in existence. And even the slightest change in his mental fortitude could warp the world itself. And not only that, the animal companion he had was actually the embodiment of malice and evil and wants the power of chaos for himself. Thus, we get Kath introduced into the story. We have this whole big arc. Arthur comes up with the idea to consume Kath because he can't kill him, so he gets all the power of chaos back. But Kath was eating away at him from the inside thanks to the information that we know of this recent chapter, eating away like Arthur's own personality, which is how he ended up, perfectly mimicking Arthur and his beliefs, his personality, everything. So everyone was pretty much fooled. But here comes the infuriating part of this. You can excuse, if you really want to, all the shitty things that she did in Seven Deadly Sins up till now. After she found that Kath was eating away at Arthur from the inside, she separated Arthur from Kath. But Kath already had like 90% of the power of chaos. That we don't get an actual hard number, but she says most of the power of chaos. I'm going with 90% or 80% for right now. And Arthur has maybe like 10 to 20% due to his weakened state that we see at this point. She goes into hiding to protect Arthur. Okay, fine. And she looks over Gawain from infancy to now with her mechanical doll and even creates a mechanical puppet for Escanor's soul to reside into so he can help raise their daughter. Okay, fine. The thing that pisses me off is that she could have told the rest of the Sins. It is clear that she could have found a way out of Camelot with her magic doll or whatever, perhaps while Kath was expanding his territory. He's usually in Camelot most of the time anyway. She could have found a way to send a messenger through to Britannia, to Meliodas, Bond, Deanne, and King, and say, hey, guys, Kath is still around. You guys should prepare because he's looking and acting like Arthur, but he's basically way more psychotic now. Do not be afraid to fight, because as we saw in the previous arc, when Kath fought 5 of the Sins, if some of them weren't even at their strongest because Bond was aged up, and Meliodas had to go assault mode now. So like they were all essentially at their best in terms of sheer power, and Elizabeth was healing them constantly. They were dog-walking Cath, and even then, Bond by himself was dominating in the fight against Cath. Yeah, they couldn't beat him, but at least we could have gotten the Nightmare Teller generational trauma 7 Deadly Sins combo move that helped beat Cath at the end of the day way sooner. That would have saved so much death and destruction. The Four Knights of the Apocalypse would not have even probably been needed, and so many things could have been avoided. For all we know, Percival probably still would have been created, and the circumstances probably still would have happened, but due to the Four Knights of the Apocalypse prophecy probably not being a thing anymore, maybe Percival will still be on God's finger with Vargas for a bit longer, for all we know, and not meeting on in Haciendas and all that stuff. So, like, stuff in the story probably wouldn't have happened, but a lot of the death, destruction, and suffering that so many innocent people, and even to the main characters in terms of, like, trauma, like what happens with Tristan on, like, 90% of the time, the whole thing with Jericho probably wouldn't have happened, for all we know. I want to be optimistic. Merlin's decisions have caused so much heartbreak and destruction in the entirety of 7 Deadly Sins, and it makes so much sense just to say she is just straight up the secret villain of the story, and she doesn't even know it. This is kind of a mini rant in terms of Merlin, because I do kind of like Merlin's character and how she is so blinded by her ambitions 90% of the time that she doesn't even see the actual repercussions of these decisions and events, as it shows that she is a flawed character, and I like that. But my God, is some of her decision-making so ungodly stupid that it causes so many unforeseen circumstances that if one small thing was different, the entire world would have ended, at least in timeline for 7 Deadly Sins, 18 to 19 years ago. So yeah, Merlin is basically the villain of the story in disguise. I will never forgive her for all the shit that's happened in 7 Deadly Sins and Four Knights of the Apocalypse right now, because she could have saved everybody so much trouble if she just talked to them at the end of the day. But you guys let me know your thoughts and opinions on this whole Merlin discussion. I'm planning on doing a lot more of these like post-chapter discussions. I am maybe do 2, but they probably won't be as long as this. I'm aiming for 5 to 10 minutes in terms of length, so they can be like a decent sized chunk for you guys to be able to watch before the next chapter comes out. Hope you all enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts, and have an awesome day.